Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I'm so happy that you guys are joining us today. So for those of you who are just returning, you know the drill. We're going to get down to some Parkinson's Foundation housekeeping. And for those of you who are just joining us, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ellis. I'm Community Programs Manager for the Florida and Gulf Coast chapters of the Parkinson's Foundation. I've said it once, I'm going to say it twice. I'm tuning in from Tampa, Florida. Go Buccaneers. Let us know where you're joining us from today in the chat. So the Parkinson's Foundation will be hosting virtual events each Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of the week. To learn more and to register, you can visit parkinson.org/PD Health. I'd like to highlight that we are hosting Spanish Mindfulness Mondays. That's going to be on the fourth Monday of each month. Again, Spanish Mindfulness Mondays on the fourth Monday of each month. PD Health at Home is presented by the Light of Day Foundation, whose generosity has made this programming possible. So I would like to send a big thank you to the Light of Day Foundation for their tremendous support. The Parkinson's Foundation provides families with free resources, including our website, parkinson.org, educational books, webinars, podcasts, a hospitalization kit, and our toll-free helpline, 1-800-4PD-INFO, which is staffed by bilingual Parkinson's specialists. To learn more about our resources and our upcoming virtual events, you can check out that chat. Jennifer's going to drop our website and our helpline phone number in the chat, and we can take a screenshot of our slide here. Art therapy can help improve physical, psychological, and social functioning in people living with Parkinson's disease. Join us next Wellness Wednesday for a unique and fun experience connecting with others through exploring art. You can learn more and register for that program at parkinson.org/PD Health. And of course, don't forget to tune in next week with myself. We'll be exploring the topic of gratitude. So next Mindfulness Monday, we will be talking about gratitude. Great. So without further ado, I'm just going to do one more shout out to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who we won the Super Bowl this year. Just so excited about that. And we'll move into a mindfulness session with our speaker today, Dr. Taylor Rush. Dr. Rush, it's such an honor to have you with us each second Monday of the month. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much, Krista. I'm so excited to be back with you guys this month. It's a cold and snowy day in Cleveland. I wish I were in Tampa celebrating with you. As a Florida girl myself, I can appreciate the excitement when the home team wins. So thank you all for having me here. So for those who have heard me talk in the past, we know that these sessions are geared toward the theme of acceptance in mindfulness. And I was giving this session a little bit of thought, and I noticed a theme in some of my conversations with people and some of my conversations with myself that it might be a good topic to talk about emotional inquiry as it relates to acceptance. And so we're going to talk about what that means and how we can use it as part of our meditation practice. So last month, for those of you who watched, you may recall that we talked about the power of pause. And so basically it's that importance of being able to pause with yourself from time to time and just take notice of what's going on so that you can kind of reassemble, reorganize, stay anchored to the moment and be able to move forward as best as you can, regardless of stress or situation. And so this month, I wanted to talk a little bit more about when we do our check-ins, where does our focus go? And how can we sometimes maybe get wrapped up in things that make it hard to be in the moment and accept it for what it is? And so when I work with individuals on this idea of taking a pause to accept what's going on, when we do those self-check-ins, it's a very common issue that people can sometimes get snagged in their own thoughts. So if they check in with themselves, and because they feel stressed or anxious or sad or upset or even excited about something, and they want to check in, they may ask a lot of why questions. And so what I mean by that is, why is this happening? Why do I feel this way? Why can't I make it stop? And so, our thoughts sometimes end up making us more agitated or making us feel a bit more rooted in a negative experience. And something that I talked about a couple of months ago, I think it was in November, I may have talked about this, but we talked about the first darts versus the second darts, about how we respond to things emotionally. So according to Buddhist teachings, first darts are sufferings that pierce us, that are just inevitable in life. Second darts that tend to pierce us are ones that we bring upon ourselves. So if we feel upset about something, we might have a very good reason for doing so. If we end up with a flat tire on the side of the road, we might be upset about that. And that would be completely natural, because that's an inevitable suffering in life. But then getting upset about it, like, who left a nail out in the middle of the road, or what's wrong with these tires, and why didn't they last longer, whatever it may be, that's suffering that we then add on to the initial experience of suffering. And so when we do our emotional check-ins, part of the process is not just better understanding what's going on, but also trying to possibly not engage those second darts of suffering that we bring upon ourselves. And so instead of asking why questions, perhaps consider asking yourself what questions. So what am I noticing right now? What in my body or in my mind is asking for attention or is asking for acceptance? How am I feeling right now? So you can add in a how question too. So how am I feeling emotionally? How am I feeling physically? As a way to, instead of engage in that judgment, which often comes with why, and not kind of engaging in some of those reactive thoughts. So what is going on? How am I feeling? And trying to meet these experiences amicably. Because so often, as we've said before, we are our own worst critics. We tend to have the harshest, most difficult, darkest thoughts about ourselves. We see our weaknesses as very large exaggerations, and we see our strengths as sometimes as minuscule. And so being able to meet yourself with a sense of friendship and being able to meet whatever emotions you're experiencing with that same friendliness. And that's a hard one. That's not an easy skill to cultivate, and it takes some practice. And you're not going to get it right every time. And it's not something that's going to, necessarily be intuitive, once you practice it for a bit. And so, just remember, it's all a matter of working through. And working through each experience is going to look a little bit different, just like a fingerprint. So once you take notice of what you're feeling, I often ask folks to try to put some sort of label on it, not a judgmental label, but just a label of what that emotion may be. And I think a lot of times we don't spend nearly enough time on this idea about what our emotions are and what label we attach to it. We tend to use a lot of blanket statements surrounding how we feel. So if someone says, "Oh, I feel stressed," well, what does that really mean? Is it that they're feeling overwhelmed by a situation? Is it that they're feeling upset that something isn't going their way? What is it that they feel exactly? What's an emotion statement that they could use to describe how they feel? So a lot of times if I ask people, well, how are you feeling about something? They may say, well, I'm feeling stressed. And I'm like, well, that's not exactly an emotion. I'm feeling tired, which is also not on an emotion wheel if you were to look at one. Or they'll just say, I'm not feeling good, which isn't an emotion at all. It's the absence of an emotion. So I usually encourage people to really think about what your actual emotions are. And some people find this tedious or kind of foreign because it's not something that they're used to, but there's actually some really good evidence as to why we ought to do this. Naming our emotions as well as naming our physical experiences. So if you're noticing tension in your neck, if you're noticing that you're feeling rigid in your body, or you're noticing that tremors getting worse, or you're noticing that your stomach is doing flip-flops, it helps us to label these things so our brain can then better process what's going on. It doesn't make the emotions or the physical experience go away, but it helps our brains to kind of better organize that information and connect it to what's happening in the moment. It's like your brain is trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle, and it needs you to label those pieces so it knows where to go. So once you're able to kind of label some of those emotions and physical experiences that you're having, just being able to greet each sensation gently. And so it can be sometimes advisable to say hello to those emotions and say, okay, hello, anxiety. Hello, sadness. Hello, disappointment. Or also saying yes to those things. Yes, I'm noticing anxiety. Yes, I'm noticing, how I'm feeling is uncomfortable. And so instead of saying no, or, oh, I don't want to feel this, those judgmental statements, which tend to pull us down that rabbit hole of reactive thinking and second dart reactions, it helps to just say yes or greet each emotion, whether it's something that you want to be feeling or not. And again, it helps the brain to kind of organize that information in a way that helps us to sit with it and process it appropriately. Helps us to kind of remove the clutter of all those other thoughts and some of that resistance that occurs when we're feeling something that may be uncomfortable, so that you can more fully embrace what's going on in the moment. So I thought we would do a brief meditation practice today with this theme in mind of emotional inquiry. So go ahead and get comfy in your chair as best you can. Feet on the floor or propped up, whatever's most comfortable for you. Closing your eyes or finding that fixed point that you can softly gaze at near the floor. And we'll just start with a brief check-in. Checking in with your body, noticing how it feels in the chair. Noticing your breath, whether it's shallow or deep, fast or slow. Noticing your heart rate, the rhythm of the beats of your heart. Noticing any thoughts that may be running through your mind, or if it's difficult for those thoughts to come off the hamster wheel in our brain. And taking 2 deep breaths. Allowing everything to slow down, even if just slightly. Anchoring to that breath to bring your focus to the present. And I want you to think back over this past week. And I want you to see if you can find an example of a time where it was a difficult moment. Maybe it had something to do with your health. Maybe it had to do with a family or friend interaction. Or maybe it was even something like bad rush hour traffic that you got caught in. Just thinking of a moment where you experienced a strong, difficult emotion. And if you're able to kind of paint that picture in your mind, I want you to notice if even now that it's over, that perhaps you have a strong response to it. Perhaps you still notice some of those emotions get conjured now that you're thinking about it again. And I want you to take a moment to try to label those emotions, whether you feel them now or you're just remembering how they felt in that difficult moment. Try to use the emotional labeling to really figure out what those emotions were. Whether it was frustration or sadness or worry or disappointment or anger. Just make sure you're not saying not good. And as you kind of sculpt out what those emotions may have been, and if you struggle with that, it's okay. But maybe even just noticing that it was a struggle to label what those emotions were, that's okay too. And trying to greet those emotions, saying hello to them. Recognizing that they're part of that normal range of human experience. And recognizing that as difficult as that moment may have been, and may still continue to be, that the emotions tend to rise and fall, as all emotions do. They ebb and they flow. They rarely persist to the same degree for any significant length of time. And noticing if there's any body reactions as you do that. Some people may notice that, they're, as they say hello to those emotions, that their muscle tension may decrease, their shoulders sink farther from their ears. You notice that their thoughts don't run quite as fast. And if you don't notice that, it's okay too. Remember, this is a work in progress. And taking another 2 deep breaths here. Allowing yourself to honor where your body and your mind are right now. Again, allowing yourself to say hello to whatever may arise. Remembering that when we acknowledge and let these emotions run their course, we often no longer become stuck by them. deep breath here. And start wiggling those fingers and toes, shifting around a little bit in your chair. Opening your eyes when you're ready. And maybe feeling slightly more prepared the next time those strong emotions come.
Thank you, Dr. Rush.
All right. Thank you, Krista. So I think we have a couple of minutes. If anyone had thoughts or questions about their mindfulness practice or any reflections they would like to share with the group.
I did have one question come in. They ask, is there any books that you can recommend if I'm struggling with accepting my Parkinson's disease?
Yeah, I don't know that I have read any books that were specific to Parkinson's on acceptance, but there are certainly a lot of great books out there on that idea of being able to practice acceptance. And certainly there are many mindfulness resources available that talk about this so much because there's so many things that we all have trouble with accepting, right? And so there is one book that is a wonderful book called Radical Acceptance. And it's by Tara Brach, Brach. She's a phenomenal psychologist, wonderful writer, has been practicing mindfulness and Buddhism for decades. And she wrote this book, Radical Acceptance. And some of the ideas that I talk about in these groups are reflections from some of her teachings and things that I've read over the years that she, I think, just summarizes so well. So certainly if you're looking at wanting to read more about acceptance, that's a wonderful resource.
Yes, and Dr. Rush and I were chatting before we went live today, and I was asking her, how do you find inspiration to lead sessions, to continue leading sessions on a very specific topic? And she said reading, and of course her patients and with the visits with her clients, having those sessions, and the inspiration comes from the patients, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got some comments coming in. Vicky says, I didn't even think I was upset until I blurted out frustration in the moment.
That's amazing. Yes. And so often we may have these undercurrents of emotions that we're not necessarily acknowledging or recognizing in any given moment. But then when we actually give pause to it, it kind of opens the door for us to experience it. And we are sometimes surprised by what we experience. Some people start crying, because they're like, oh my gosh, there's something there that I was not paying much attention to. And now that I am, it's quite powerful. So that's not uncommon. And it's not a bad thing whatsoever. Oftentimes it just means that needed to come out and you gave it a way to do so. So that's awesome, Vicki.
So for those of you who didn't catch it, the book is called Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. If you scroll through the chat, you'll see that written down in several places. We have a question from Peggy. How do you deal with pain that happens when the meds wear off? And then she goes on to say pain is not an emotion.
Ooh, Peggy, I might have to disagree with you on that one. So pain, in my experience, and the literature certainly suggests this too, the research on pain, is that it is actually both very much a physical experience as well as an emotional experience. Pain in and of itself is uncomfortable, something adverse we tend to avoid, if at all possible. But it is also very much an emotional experience, and oftentimes, and a lot of my background is actually in behavioral pain management. And something that we say in that realm is, pain may be your reality, but suffering is optional. And actually, so much of what we experience in pain that's negative is the emotional components that are with it. And so, and actually, John Kabat-Zinn, the modern father of mindfulness in the United States, he started his mindfulness practice in a pain clinic up in Worcester, Massachusetts. And that's where he recognized that there was a need for this, that, these people with a chronic intractable pain that is not curative, it's something that they had to live with, and using mindfulness actually helped them do so much better. And so what I would say is, in those moments, even though pain, the physical pain of wearing off is something that's inevitable, the suffering that may come with it could be optional. By greeting the pain the same as you would a negative emotion. Hi, pain. Welcome to the party. Here we are. And that, and for many people, they look at me like I'm crazy the first time I say that. They're like, really? That's what we're going to do, is say hi, pain, and that's going to make it go away? And it doesn't. I'm not here to say that erases it, but it's a way to become friends with it rather than feel it's as if it's your adversary. And that takes a lot of practice. That's high level stuff. But the more you practice it, the more of a footing you get with it, and the less the pain ends up having power over you, and you just kind of join it where it's at.
Thank you, Dr. Rush. I believe we're just at our time for today. I do see a few questions here. So if you guys, if we weren't able to get to your questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to our helpline. That number is 1-800-4PD-INFO. Again, 1-800-4PD-INFO. And Dr. Rush, I want to thank you sincerely for all your guidance and wisdom to share with our Mindful Parkinson's community today. And I hope to see you all next Monday. Continue working through your practice of acceptance through this week. And next week, we will tackle gratitude. So thank you all for joining us.